What If season 2 had a drop over the holidays? They actually did one episode a day for 9 days, which is why I wasn't reviewing it week by week. I decided I was just going to wait for them all to come out, and I will just give a general overview of the season. There are some really fun stories in this one. The first episode, What If Nebula Joined the Nova Corps? It's a fun detective noir episode, has like Chinatown vibes to it. It's a lot of fun. I really liked it. The second episode, What If Peter Quill Attacked Earth's Mightiest Heroes, where it has basically the premise of What If is it tells alternate stories where like usually it's one change in a story that veers off into a completely different timeline, although some of these do more than just a single change. But this one, Yondu actually does hand Peter Quill over to Ego instead of taking him for himself. And as a consequence, Ego is using Peter Quill to go and spread his blue space cancer everywhere early. And so Peter Quill returns to Earth to do it there. And so they have to assemble the Avengers in the 80s, which means you have to pick the superheroes who would have been active at that time. And I think the lineup they end up with is the OG Ant-Man, Hank Pym. They go with the Goliath, Lawrence Fishburne's character, who we never actually see him as a superhero in the Ant-Man films. They just briefly talk about how he used to be a Goliath. We've also got T'Chaka, the original Black Panther, the father of T'Challa. They have Mar-Vell and Thor, because, Thor is thousands of years old, so of course he can just show up. But they also get Bucky, the Winter Soldier, because it's a global threat, so they're able to work with the Soviet Union to get Bucky. But they don't get Red Guardian, which seemed odd to me, because I thought Red Guardian would have been active in the 80s because he was created as a Soviet hero, and the Soviet Union ended after the 80s, so just a little bit of a missed opportunity there. And another thing that I take issue with this episode, and then I'm going to take issue with a lot of these episodes, is that because these are 30-minute animated episodes, they often don't have time to let that kind of team building stuff that you would expect to see for like an Avenger-style team-up. You don't get any of that actually happening. Like this episode, I didn't really get a feel that any of these characters are having any kind of solid bond or doing any of the cool stuff like, power combos. Like if you watch the original Avengers, there's like a whole sequence where you get to see a bunch of the heroes using their power in combination with each other. That really helps sell the team dynamic. And like the first season finale of What If brought in a bunch of the characters from the different episodes to team up together to fight a multiversal threat. But like none of these characters actually ended up building a rapport with each other. They just all were like, okay, we're here and we're all going to individually punch the bad guy. I feel like if you're going to do a team up thing, it needs more build up. And because What If is mostly standalone stories, that's difficult to do. That being said, one thing that they are doing, they do have a bit of a story arc going through, and I'm not sure whether I like it or not, but Captain Carter doesn't just get a sequel episode, because Captain Carter, she was like one of the first What If episodes, and it's basically the story of Captain America, except Peggy gets the serum instead of Steve. And the follow-up is a very similar story to The Winter Soldier, but then they decide to have Captain Carter end up like going through the multiverse, and so she shows up in a couple other stories as well. So she's kind of like, aside from Uatu, the narrator, she's kind of like the closest thing you can get to a main character running through this show. And I can understand wanting to have that kind of cohesive narrative. So like, I'm not fully against it. I just would prefer that the majority of these stories just maintain the standalone story structure. Just keep the what if about it. One thing that I thought was interesting, there's an episode called What If Kahorti Reshaped the World? And if you have never heard the name Kahorti before, that's because this is a brand new hero created for the show. This is not a Marvel comic character. This is an original superhero in the MCU made for this show. I assume they have plans for a Kahorti, but that episode is spoken entirely in Mohawk. And Kahorti she is a Mohawk superhero. And you're going to see a lot of people saying that she's overpowered because she gets her powers from the Tesseract. Which means, yeah, she is overpowered. Just like Scarlet Witch is overpowered because she got her powers from an Infinity Stone, or Carol Danvers is overpowered because she got her powers from the Tesseract. So yes, she is a very powerful character, and I did find the episode is a lot of fun, and it's like, because it is all in Mohawk, it like I had to pay closer attention to it, which I appreciated, because sometimes if I'm reviewing a lot of stuff, I might not pay as close attention as I should. So having me forced to read the subtitles, I was really paying attention to the whole story. And the only issue that I would take with the character of Cohorty is that it feels like all of her conflict comes from outside, and she never really seems to struggle with learning how to use her powers or anything like that. And again, these are pretty short episodes, and they just wanted to do a brief origin stuff on her, and I assume they have plans for her possibly in live action with like Secret Wars or something like that. I assume that they wouldn't create a whole new character that they spent a lot of time developing with the Mohawk Nation. Like there were a lot of Mohawk consultants for this episode, and I assume all of that care was taken because they really want to have this new Native American character. So I'm interested to see where they go with that. I felt that her story was a little bare bones from a story structure. It's still nice to see a look at a Native superhero told by Native people. One episode that I was really looking forward to that ultimately really disappointed, though, was What If the Avengers Assembled in 1602? Because I saw that and I immediately went, aha, they are doing Neil Gaiman's 1602. This was famously the first comic that Neil Gaiman ever wrote for Marvel, because Neil Gaiman before that point had been a DC regular. And unfortunately, this has basically nothing to do with Neil Gaiman 1602, other than it's set in the year 1602, and there's like the bare setup of it in that Steve Rogers was sent back in time, and his presence in this period in the past has caused Marvel heroes to show up 400 years early, but it's also destabilizing the universe, and he has to be sent away. Those things are elements from the original comic that they keep, but basically everything else is done. Because, again, this is done from the perspective of the MCU rather than Marvel Comics. So, like, the X-Men haven't really been established in the MCU yet, and the mutants were a big part of 1602. There's a lot of characters that just don't show up here, like Spider-Man's not in this one. He had quite a substantial role in 1602. They don't even go to the New World, because in the original Marvel 1602, Steve Rogers is posing as a Native American. Granted, he is still white and blonde, and people make note of that, but it was that he had crashed into the past and ended up being taken in by a tribe. And because he, Captain America, well, if he's Captain America and it's 400 years ago, you go to America. Who are the Americans? They're natives. But overall, I was really disappointed that this adaptation had so little to do with Neil Gaiman's actual work, and I would like to see them do a more faithful adaptation, like as its own series. I don't think you could do that in just a 30-minute episode, so I wasn't expecting them to go full bore. I was hoping that they would have it set up in such a way that it would be getting a spin-off, which still could happen, but I don't know that I'd want a spin-off with the way that they had it set up here. It was a little disappointing. But overall, I had fun with this season. I'm looking forward to season 3. This is the kind of show where even if I don't necessarily like the recurring arcs, I can always look forward to individual episodes. I think season 3 is going to be the last. I kind of hope that What If is a show that they will just bring back every now and again when they've got new stories that they can riff off of. What If is, as a comic book, has been running for decades. And, it's always fun. It's always fun to just ask what if. Blood Video Company says, isn't What If just Marvel Audience Research the show? Well, I do know, I think they're going to be doing a Marvel Zombies spin-off, because that was a pretty popular episode of the first season. So it's possible. And a lot of What If stories have ended up spinning off into successful comic runs. I think Mayday Parker, Spider-Girl from Earth, I think it was I don't even remember which Earth it was, but it was an alternate universe Spider-Girl story. And I think that spawned off of a What If. So, there's always potential for, What If stories to spring off into their own thing. So yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible that they're doing market research here. He said, which Spider-Girl, the Japanese anime degenerate one? No. Mayday Parker was, she was Peter and Mary Jane's daughter. I think in the main timeline, they miscarried, and there was also concern that Peter's radioactive sperm might kill MJ, and so they decided not to have a kid. But this is like an alternate timeline in which it all turned out okay, and they were able to have a kid who ends up getting spider powers. Anyway, I like the concept of What If. Even if I didn't like all the episodes this season, it is a show where you can just grab the ones that you want, because they are mostly standalone. I thought there was probably a little bit too much recurring plot threads for my tastes for this kind of a show. I hope season 3 eases off the brakes on that, or eases off the gas on that one, and just goes back to mostly standalone stories. The MCU is interconnected enough as is. We don't really need these what ifs to also be interconnected with each other. This is a show whose premise is just, hey, let's just see where this goes. Blood Video says, is that what Peter B's daughter is called? I think he does call her Mayday. It's been a while since I saw Across the Spider-Verse, so but I think I seem to remember he called her Mayday. Blood Video Company says DC should just make a show called Elseworlds, and just like market research the show. So fun story about that. James Gunn said that once the DCU officially launches with Superman Legacy in 2025, any DC project that is a TV show or a movie will be in the DCU unless it's not. If it's not part of the main DCU, like it's one of Matt Reeves' Batman movies or one of the Joker movies, it will be labeled as explicitly as DC Elseworlds. So they're not going to be making an Elseworlds story or show, but they will be using that branding so that you can tell which things are in fact part of the main timeline and which things are their own thing. Of course, Elseworlds has also been, it's not exactly like What If, because What If is like taking like a single point, like, you know, the butterfly effect, seeing what happens when you make a single point change in the timeline, versus Elseworlds, which tends to be a little bit more loose with, you know, telling an alternate story. Actually, I would say probably the closest example I can think of an Elseworlds story that's really close to What If would be Superman Red Sun. Because that in that story, what if Kal-El's pod hits Earth 12 hours later? So instead of landing in Kansas, it lands in the Ukraine. Or sorry, not the Ukraine, it lands in Ukraine. And because of that, and because he lands in the 30s, he ends up becoming a Soviet hero. Yeah, that was a really interesting story. I really liked that one. Do I have swag, Fesh of the Gay? Maybe. I haven't been doing enough of these poses. I need to get more into the habit of using them. It's just doing my whole spiel, reviewing things, and I'm not even thinking, oh yeah, I just paid a bunch of money for a bunch of these poses. I should probably use them. Hey, thanks for watching. Your view means a lot. Don't forget to toss me a like and subscribe and ring the bell. And drop a comment below telling me what you thought of the video. I stream Mondays and Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific and Sundays at 2, so catch me live and join in on the convo. You can find all my socials in the description below, and thank you to all my patrons with a very special shout out to my Whaled Shark tier patron Ryan D and my Anemone friend tier patron Piftle Cakes. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.